My name's Rob, I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Rob.
I have experience with this step with the help of God. Big Book Step Study sponsor. I'm in the process of making amends, and I try to practice 10, 11, and 12 on a daily basis. I want to thank Joe for asking me to come out here and speak. That's a short reading. It's too short. I don't ask what I'm speaking on. I don't find out until I get to the meeting. But on the way here, I'm hoping it's a long reading. Then when I got here and I sat up here, he said, it's step 6 and 7. I'm like, oh no. But I'm originally from Southie, so you can only imagine the behaviors that I had. You know, I grew up in Southie. I lived there for 35 years. I grew up poor. So me, my brother, and my sister, we would steal to get money, and that's what we did. We would give our money, and that was acceptable. I didn't know it was a character defect at that time. I did it because I was poor. I wanted money. I wanted money to drink. You know, I wanted money to do other things that other kids were doing. You know, and I wasn't able to do that unless I went out and I stole to get it. You know, and most of my life, those are the behaviors that I had to do. I ended up in prison at a very young age, 17 years old, 18 years old. I was already in Walpole. My first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting I came to was in 1986. I was 18 years old. I was in the state prison at that time. I didn't get sober until 2005. And in between all that time was a lot more jail, a lot more lying, a lot more stealing, and a lot more cheating. You know, and I just used people to get what I wanted to get. And once I got what I wanted, I got rid of them. You know, and well, I became homeless because that's where my alcoholism took me. I ended up in a Marlboro shelter. The first detox I was ever in, I was 31 years old. The judge sent me to AgCare Hospital. Well, he gave me an opportunity to go to AgCare Hospital, I would say, you know, because he was looking at my record. And he's like, "You haven't been arrested in about 12 years, so we're gonna let you go to detox." And I went to Somerville Detox. It was the first detox I was ever in. I was 31 years old. What I know today is anytime I ever went somewhere is because somebody was telling me to go somewhere. I was forced to go there. I was on probation or I was on parole, you know, and it never worked because I really never wanted to be there to begin with. You know, I left that detox, I went out, I drank. Within about 6 months, I was already back in prison again. And that's what I would repeat over and over. Going in and out of jail, going in and out of detox, not changing any of my behaviors, not doing anything anybody suggested. I used to hear this guy in Southie all the time because sometimes I did go to meetings and sometimes I did pay attention, even though I was on probation or parole, and the guy used to always say that the only suggestions that you pay for are the ones that you don't take. Mm-hmm. And I can really relate to that statement, you know, because over the years, the 25 years of coming in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous, a lot of people gave me a lot of good suggestions and I didn't take any of them, you know, because I ran on self-reliance and self-will. I was doing things my way, you know. I want to get into this process, but between 1999 and 2005, I picked up 11 court cases. I went back to prison 4 more times. You know, every time I got out, I thought I could figure it out on my own. I thought I could do it different, you know, and I landed in AgCare Hospital the last time, and I ended up in the Marlboro shelter, you know, and I started going to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. And for my first 4.5 years in Alcoholics Anonymous, I went to a lot of meetings. I joined groups, I did a ton of commitments, and I did a lot of things that a lot of us do at the beginning. You know, I stayed connected, I got a sponsor, which was something that I really didn't want to do. I didn't want to ask another human being for help, that's for sure, because I thought I could figure it out on my own. And I was about 4.5 years sober, and what I know today is that my behaviors in Alcoholics Anonymous started to become unacceptable to me. You know, I was sober, but I was still lying, I was still cheating, I was still stealing. I was still sleeping with people's wives. I was doing things that I shouldn't be doing. And I always make this statement, and people would come up to me and say, "You need to stop doing what you're doing." And my answer to them was, "You need to mind your own business. If you got a problem with that, we can take it outside and straighten it out." That's the really attitude that I had. And in that 4.5 years sober, I went to a Big Book Step Study meeting in Bolton when they started that meeting out there, and I got a sponsor. You know, and what I know today is that I was ready to do this work. I didn't know it then, I know it today. You know, and like most of us that have done this work, you read the first 63 pages of this book to me. I did my 3rd step with my sponsor. What I remember about doing my 3rd step with my sponsor is I was going to get on my knees and I was going to hold my hand with another human being. Mm-hmm. you know, and I was going to make a decision that I was going to do the rest of this work and I was going to carry this message to somebody else. So as I'm on my knees with my sponsor, what's going through my mind is I'm thinking of the song by Hootie and the Blowfish, Hold My Hand. That's what I'm thinking about when I'm holding this guy's hand, because I'm literally shaking. I don't know what I'm doing. All I know is I want to start writing, you know. And the third step talks about it, that at the end we immediately start writing the fourth step, and that's literally what I did. I wrote my fourth step in about 8 months. I wouldn't say that I wrote every single day, but I wrote the majority of the time. I had over 500 resentments, about close to 100 fears, and whatever I had in my sex conduct. And when I was done with my writing, I went over to my sponsor's house and I started doing my fifth step with my sponsor. You know, and when I was reading my fifth step to my sponsor, as I done it, and at the end he asked me if I left anything out. I said, I don't believe that I did. He said, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was 5 years sober at that point. And for the first time, I felt like I became part of Alcoholics Anonymous. And like the reading says, in step 5 is that we go home, we put the book on the shelf, we spend an hour with God, and we do step 6 and 7. And that's what I did. And I didn't feel anything from it. You know what I mean? I didn't have a spiritual experience as a result of doing my fifth step. What I know today is that I had a spiritual experience when I was writing out my resentments, as I literally felt those resentments being lifted from me. It wasn't until a couple of days later that I felt that the weight that I was carrying, I was like, what was that? I was 41 years old when I did my fifth step. I'm 49 now. But the weight that I was carrying my whole life was lifted from me as a result of doing that fifth step with my sponsor. And he said, just go home and do 6 and 7, and that's basically what I did. You know, and I went on my way, started making my list. But the funny thing about character defects is they're always going to come up. You know, selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or afraid. They're going to come up. Self-centered fear, which is at the core of this disease, which activates my character defects. When I get afraid, I'm going to get upset. And one of the things, like I was saying earlier, I used to love to steal. You know what I mean? I got a thrill out of stealing. Robbing people's houses or stealing cars, you know, and that type of behavior that I was doing. And like I was saying earlier, my behaviors in Alcoholics Anonymous caught up to me. They became unacceptable to me. Things that at one point in my life were acceptable to me were no longer acceptable. You know, it was no longer acceptable to look at people and say, what the F are you looking at? It was no longer acceptable to say, if you got a problem with that, we can go outside and we can fight about it. You know what I mean? And I don't steal anymore. You know, one thing I could say about step 6 and 7 is you become aware. You know, once you become aware of something, it allows you to be able to work on it. You know, before, my whole life, I was never aware that it was a character defect. I heard this guy say this statement one time, and I could really relate to it. He said he was a defect looking for a character. And I could really understand that statement, you know. And so those behaviors that I used to practice, I don't practice anymore. And it's really all contingent on how connected I am to the God of my understanding. Whether I'm spiritually fit or not, it's really going to determine whether I'm going to say something that I don't want to say, whether I'm going to want to fight somebody, or whether I'm going to do something that I'm going to regret and I'm going to have to make amends for. Not to get into later into step 10, but we're always going to have character defects. They're always going to come up. It's what I do when those things come up. Do I choose to feed into them? Do I choose to ask God for help? Because I've made mistakes even in recovery, you know, even after doing this process. I work in treatment. I've been working in treatment for almost 5 years. So I deal with untreated alcoholism for 40 hours a week. So you can only imagine how important it is for me to try to remain spiritually fit. And I've said things to clients that I just wasn't spiritually fit at that moment. And I've literally had to go back and make amends to those clients because I've said something that I didn't want to say. You know, when my character defects come out, mostly it's when I'm tired. If I'm really tired, it's like I stay quiet. I pretty much stay quiet because I know that if somebody says something to me, then I might say something that I don't want to say, or I might say something that I'm going to regret, you know. And as a result of doing this work, the crazy thing is, once you become aware of those behaviors, you can no longer practice those behaviors without almost feeling physically sick. Like when I hurt somebody, or if I do something wrong today, if I say something that I shouldn't have said, I literally feel almost sick inside. And if I don't correct that behavior, like immediately, not next week, today, you know what I mean? I'm almost going to feel physically sick. And that's huge for me, because I used to go around and just hurt people and be like, you know what, screw you, see you later. you know, and today I don't do that. And the sixth step is about willingness. You know, every day I have to be willing, you know, to have God remove these character defects. And the seven-step prayer is something that I use in the morning, and I also use it when I get to work. You know, before I go into work, I say it again, because like I said, it's very important for me to be connected to the God of my understanding when I'm dealing with people that have untreated alcoholism. And I can see my behaviors in them. I see me, that's what I see. You know what I mean? And I know that I'm not any different than them. You know? And it's just huge. Not to have to lie to people anymore, not have to worry about what I said anymore, to keep up with those lies, and to steal from people, to rob from people, and to not hurt people. You know, I've been sober for 12 and a half years. In the past 8 years since I've done this work, I've becoming the person that God intends me to be. You know what I mean? I'm pretty reserved, I'm pretty quiet. I don't talk a lot unless I'm like at a meeting, but this process has completely not only changed the way I look at things, it's changed the way I react to people and places and things, and it's literally changed my life. I went from a person who was literally sleeping on the streets in the wintertime, homeless, to a person who has a job, who's in school at Worcester State, you know, and is about to buy a house. I'm trying to buy a house with my wife, you know what I mean? And 12 and a half years ago, I was sleeping in a box, you know what I mean? And but the biggest changes that have occurred for me is as a result of doing this work. You know, if I didn't do this work, I would still be the same person that I brought into Alcoholics Anonymous in 2005. And I know today that I was heading towards something bad at 4.5 years sober. If I didn't get involved in this work, something was going to happen. Either I was going to go out, you know what I mean, or I was going to do something bad. And the difference is today, man, is that I keep it moving regardless. You know what I mean? The defects, they're always going to come up. It's what I do when they come up. You know, and when I'm spiritually fit, I literally had clients come up to me sometimes and say, doesn't anything even bother you? Because they be yelling, screaming, swearing at each other, almost fighting, and I'm just standing there looking at them, you know? And my answer to them was, you should have saw me about 12 and a half years ago. I probably would have been in the fight with you, you know? And that's the way I was, you know? If you're just checking out this work, this is Alcoholics Anonymous. This is how we recover from a seemingly hopeless condition of mind and body. You know what I mean? So if you're writing, keep writing. I'm grateful to be here and be sober. Thank you.